ಕಂಜದಳಾಯತಾಕ್ಷಿ ಕಂಜದಳಾಯತಾಕ್ಷಿ ಕಾಮಾಕ್ಷಿ ಕಂಜದಳಾಯತಾಕ್ಷಿ ಕಾಮಾಕ್ಷಿ ಕಮಲ ಮನೋಹರಿ ತ್ರಿಪುರ ಸುಂದರಿ ಕಂಜದಳಾಯತಾಕ್ಷಿ ರಾಕಾಶ ಶಿವದನೆ ರಾಕಾಶ ಶಿವದನೆ ಸುರದನೆ ರಕ್ಷಿತ ಮದನೆ ರತ್ನ ಸದನೆ ಶ್ರೀಕಾಂಚನ ವಸನೆ ಶ್ರೀಕಾಂಚಿ ನಿವಸನೆ ಸುರಸನೆ ಶೃಂಗಾರಾಶ್ರಯ ಮಂದಹಸನೆ ಶ್ರೀಕಾಂಚಿ ನಿವಸನೆ ಸುರಸನೆ ಶೃಂಗಾರಾಶ್ರಯ ಮಂದಹಸನೆ ರಾಕಾಶ ಶಿವದನೆ ಸುರದನೆ ರಕ್ಷಿತ ಮದನೆ ರತ್ನ ಸದನೆ.
Today, as we see Devi Kamakshi as Devi Parvati in her most popular Swarupa, this particular composition of Dikshitar becomes a very important reference. Here, Dikshitar mentions a very important story in this Purana. He says, Rakshita Madane, the Devi who protected Manmatha himself. And the story is very interesting. It goes like, at a certain time, there were three brothers, Taraka, Simhamukha and Padmasura, who were tormenting the Devas because of the power of a varam or a boon that they had, which was that only a child of Lord Shiva will be able to vanquish them. And Shiva was in this still state as the Jnana Swarupa, as Dakshinamurti. So there was no way of inciting him to produce progeny to vanquish these asuras. So the Devas were very perplexed, and they finally assigned Manmatha or Kama the job of inciting love between this Lord Shiva and Devi Parvati so that they may produce an offspring which will vanquish these demons. The problem here was that Manmatha didn't approach Shiva with humility and surrender before him. The problem was that he came with pride and arrogance instead of humility, and he tried to win over Lord Shiva with his weapons. And Shiva, immediately disturbed and angered by this action, opened his third eye and burnt Manmatha to ashes. At this juncture, Devi Parvati took mercy on Manmatha and revived him as Ananga, which means the one without Anga, the one without a physical form, but he is still present and alive and only visible to his wife, Devi Rati. And hence Dikshitar says, Rakshita Madane, the one who protected Manmatha. And after doing this, Devi seizes his weapons and becomes Kameshwari. He was Kama and she becomes Kameshwari, holding the sugarcane bow and the Panchabana. And she teaches Manmatha that the only way to win over Lord Shiva is by submitting to him with humility. So she approaches Lord Shiva with devotion and gazes at him with love-filled, affectionate eyes, and that's how she earns the title Kamakshi. Kama means affectionate in this context, and Akshi means eyes. So the love-filled eyes of Devi give her the title Kamakshi, and with these humble, love-filled glances, she wins over Shiva, and which is why Dikshitar again in this Kriti says, Shringarashraya Mandahasane, the one whose gentle smile invokes the sentiment of Shringara or love. So after this happens, Devi Parvati and Shiva get wedded, the Parvati Kalyanam occurs, and they unite as a couple. And the story of Subramanya continues from there. But what happens after this is continued in the Kamakshi Vilasam as narrated by Mahapariva in his book Devatin Kural. So the story continues that Manmatha feels wronged by this whole incident, and to ask for justice, he comes to Kanchipuram and does penance towards Kamakshi Devi. And finally, she appears before him and he argues his case. He says, Kamakshi Devi, I was sent on a mission to kindle love between you and Lord Shiva. And finally, that is exactly what happened. Even if it didn't happen the way I planned it, you both finally got married, which indirectly counts as a victory for me, who is the god of love. But even then, the world will always only speak of me as the defeated one who got burnt to ashes by Lord Shiva. which is why even today Shiva is called Kamari, the enemy of Kama. So I will always be seen as the loser, even though my mission was actually accomplished. So isn't it only fair that I get credit for uniting both of you? Don't you think this is unfair if I don't? You're the mother goddess Kamakshi, so it is your duty to deliver justice to me. So hearing this, just like parents who pretend to make their little kids happy, the universal parents, Jagataf Pitarau Vande Parvati Parameshwarau, says Kalidasa. So the universal parents, Parvati and Parameshwara, act out a leela to satisfy Manmatha. So Kamakshi Devi, immediately on hearing Manmatha's case, withdraws her powers from all other places, temples and even from Kailasha and stores it all here in Kanchipuram. Immediately, Parameshwara plays along and he pretends to be devastated without his Shakti beside him. So seeing Parameshwara's plight, Brahmadeva acts as a messenger and approaches Kanchi Kamakshi Devi, and Kamakshi Devi explains why she did all this, and she returns her presence to all other kshetrams but lays before a few conditions and says, as a symbol of Manmatha's victory, there should be no other Devi Alayam in all of Kanchipuram, and to this day, though there are hordes of Shiva Alayams in Kanchipuram, none of them have a separate shrine for Devi, and the Kamakshi Amman temple is the only Devi Alayam there, so that when people come to Kanchipuram and see that there are no Devi shrines here, along with Shiva, they will, remember the story of Manmatha. And further, she decrees that Kanchi would henceforth be called Shivajit Kshetram, in memory of Manmatha, who triumphed over Lord Shiva. Such is the Karuna of Devi Kamakshi, who despite Manmatha's mistakes, graces him like a mother would grace her son. So after mentioning Devi's grace for Manmatha, using the words Rakshita Madane, Dikshitar goes on to hint at yet another story of Parvati associated with Kanchipuram.
एकानेकाक्षरि भुवनेश्वरि एकानन्दामृतजरि भास्वरि एकाग्रमनो लयकरि श्रीकरि एकाम्रेश गृहेश्वरि शङ्करि कञ्ज दलायताक्षि कामाक्षि.
Ekamresha Griheshwari, the consort of Lord Ekamreshwara. Ekamreshwara is the form of Lord Shiva in one of the most special forms in Kanchipuram specifically. And this story is said in the Skanda Puranam, wherein at a certain time when Shiva and Parvati were sporting in Kailasha, Parvati playfully shuts Shiva's eyes and immediately the world is entirely shrouded in darkness, causing havoc and destruction. And though Parvati Devi immediately lets go, the damage has already been done. So Parvati repents for this and requests Shiva for a prashchittam or an atonement. And Shiva directs her to go perform penance on the bank of river Kampa under a mango tree, which is in Kanchipuram. And Devi arrives at Kanchi and she fashions a linga out of mud and begins to worship it and does penance here and chants the Panchakshara Mantram to atone for her mistake. And as a test of Devi's devotion, Lord Shiva causes a flood in the Kampa river. And as soon as it starts to flood, Devi doesn't leave the place but instead tightly clings and embraces the Shivalinga to protect it even when engulfed by the flood. So Shiva is pleased by her boundless devotion and bhakti and blesses her. And even today, the marks of Devi's bosom are said to be imprinted on the Ekamreshwara Bhulingam, which is worshipped as the Prithvi Lingam in Kanchipuram. So this beautiful story of Kamakshi as Parvati is also mentioned by Dikshitar in this beautiful and famous Kriti. And I think it's only right to include this next composition that I'm about to sing when talking about Devi Kamakshi as Parvati. Sri Shama Shastri is one of the trinity along with Dikshitar and Tyagaraja Swami, who has almost exclusively sung about Kamakshi, and that too as Devi Parvati. And we have only about a few hundred compositions of his, but they are almost all on Devi Kamakshi. And I think Kamakshi Devi herself would be very enraged if we don't mention this great bhakta of hers. And so we will complete today's exploration with this composition of Sri Shama Shastrigal, who praises Devi Kamakshi as Parvati. This is in Ragam Galgada.
Parvati ninune पार्वती निनुने नरनम्मिति पार्वती निनुने नरनम्मिति शुकपाणि ब्रोवु पराकि कनेल सुशील पार्वती निनुने नरनम्मिति शुकपाणि ब्रोवु पराकि कनेल सुशील पार्वती निनुने गीर्वाणवन्दित पदसारस गीर्वाणवन्दित पदसारस संगीत लोले सुगुणजाले गीर्वाणवन्दित पदसारस संगीत लोले सुगुणजाले जाल मेले कामाक्षि पार्वती निनुने इंदुवदन कुंदरदन सिंदूरगमन इंदुवदन कुंदरदन सिंदूरगमन मकरंदवाणी नीलमेघवेणी गीर्वाणी पार्वती निनुने श्यामकृष्ण सोदरि शिवशंकरि गौरी श्यामकृष्ण सोदरि शिवशंकरि गौरी गुणधाम कामपीठवासिनी श्यामकृष्ण सोदरि शिवशंकरि गौरी गुणधाम कामपीठवासिनी शाम्भवी मृडाणि पार्वती निनुने नरनम्मिति शुकपाणि ब्रोवु पराकि कनेल सुशील पार्वती निनुने नरनम्मिति